Hello everyone, and welcome to my 17th Pokemon Challenge. I'm super excited to start this challenge because I can accurately showcase something really cool about Gen 3 challenges in particular, but we'll get more into that later. For now, we've got a very important question to answer. Can you beat Pokemon Emerald with only Poochyena? Let's find out. Before we get too far into the video, I'd like you all to know that I'm working really hard to produce a new Pokemon Challenge video every week, so if you like this content, please consider liking and subscribing, as it would really mean a lot to me and it would help the channel grow. Anyways, let's quickly cover the rules so we can begin. Rule number 1, no glitches, hacks, or cheats. I do, however, use speed up, otherwise these videos would take far longer to produce and I'd rather produce them quickly. Rule number 2, I can only use one Pokemon in battle. However, because I am not cheating, I do need to use HM Pokemon for travel purposes only. And lastly, rule number 3, no items in battle. This doesn't include held items, as I use Everstones during some runs, and so other held items are also allowed if necessary. With all of that out of the way, let's begin. The first objective we have is acquiring our ideal starter. For this run, I'm opting for a Jolly Nature Poochyena, as I noticed that Poochyena has some pretty decent attack stats, but is rather slow, and we can't have that. We quickly get our Jolly Poochyena after not too many resets, and then we swiftly knock out the Zigzagoon. Usually, at this part of the video, I normally get into grinding, but because I might run into shiny Pokemon while I'm EV training, I always like to make sure that I have Pokeballs on me just in case. However, we can't get Pokeballs until after we battle our rival for the first time, so we head off to do that. Brendan and his Trico aren't much of a threat to us, so we simply trade Pound and Tackle until the Trico faints. Now that we've beaten Brendan for the first time, we have access to Pokeballs and we can safely EV train without losing out on any potential shinies. Spoiler alert, we don't get any shinies this time, but we did very quickly knock out 252 Poochyena for attack EVs, as well as collectively 252 of both Zigzagoon and Wingull for speed EVs. With our EV training finally complete, we're ready to take on our first gym battle with Roxanne. Roxanne leads with her first Geodude, who is rather physically defensive. To get around this, I kept Bite as part of our move pool, since in this generation, all Dark-type moves are special attacks. We hit Bite for a huge chunk of damage, and then we're hit with Rock Tomb, lowering our speed. Roxanne then heals up her Geodude, but we hit it with 2 more bites to knock it out. Up next is Roxanne's second Geodude, who we also hit with Bite before it hits us back with Rock Throw. Roxanne then heals up her Geodude, but we land another bite and take Geodude down. Roxanne's last Pokemon is her Nosepass, who we hit with Bite to make it flinch. We then land another bite and Nosepass hits us with Block, which basically gives us a free turn, though Nosepass does end up eating its Oran Berry for more health. We use another bite, but this time we're hit with Rock Tomb, lowering our speed. However, we still outspeed at the next turn, and our next bite is a crit, earning us the win. Our next important battle is an optional one as we leave Rustboro. Brendan awaits us at the edge of the city and we end up battling against him. Brendan leads with his Wingull, who we're able to one-shot with Tackle. Following the Wingull is Trico, who we hit with Tackle for huge damage before Trico uses Absorb to heal back a bit of health. Trico then uses Quick Attack, but we're able to take down Trico with another Tackle. This is a bit of a deviation from the normal path, but I decided to completely skip Brawly for now since his team is scary and I can ignore him. Our next battle is with Brendan again. Brendan leads with his Slugma this time, who we set up on with Howl before Slugma hits us with Yawn. We then get another Howl in while Slugma wastes a turn with another Yawn, and then we fall asleep. Slugma hits us with a single Ember while we're asleep, but then we wake up and land Tackle for a one-shot. Up next is Grovyle, who we also one-shot with Tackle. Brendan's last Pokemon is his Wingull, who is yet another one-shot with an absolutely brutal crit Tackle. Channeling our Generation 5 energy, this is now our third rival battle in a row, but this battle is a bit different. Wally blocks the door to Watson, the third gym leader. We end up battling, but Borfina just couldn't help herself and ended up completely annihilating Wally's poor Waltz with a crit Tackle before Waltz could even blink. There wasn't even anything left to bury. Alright, you see Watson, but don't be fooled. This battle was pain incarnate. I'll give you a tiny, tiny taste of what battling Watson was like. Okay, now that you've had a taste of what battling Watson is really like, here's the real battle. Watson leads with his Voltorb, who we use Howl against, risking Paralyze from Spark, but thankfully we're not paralyzed and we one-shot with Tackle on the next turn. Electrike is sent out next, who we use 3 Howls against while it uses 3 Howls back at us. Finally, we're ready to fight and go for a Tackle, knocking out the Electrike without proccing Static this time. Watson's next Pokemon is his Magneton, who we immediately blast apart with Takedown. Watson's last Pokemon is his Manectric, who we tackle hoping for a one-shot but sadly fail. We're then hit by Thunder Wave, and Manectric eats a Citrus Berry before hitting us with Shockwave, but thankfully we're not paralyzed and able to land one last tackle to end the battle. Now that we've finally beaten Watson, it is time to get into some of the Team Magma stuff. Our first battle is against Magma admin Tabitha, who leads with his Numel. We instantly one-shot the Numel, same with the Poochyena on the next turn. Tabitha then sends out his second Numel, who we miss our tackle against before getting hit with a Magnitude 8. The Magnitude doesn't do too much damage, so then we're able to knock out the Numel with Tackle. Tabitha's last Pokemon is his Zubat, who is absolutely crushed by Tackle. With Tabitha beaten, our next battle is against Team Magma's boss, Maxie. Maxie leads with his Mightyena, who instantly lowers our attack with Intimidate. To counter the Intimidate, we start off with 2 Howls, tanking a Bite and getting hit with Sand Attack. Getting hit with that Sand Attack was the worst thing that could happen though, since we then miss 4 of our tackles in a row, getting hit with Bite and more Sand Attacks during those 4 turns. Finally, I decided that enough was enough and went for a Takedown, which thankfully hit, one-shotting the Mightyena. Maxie's next Pokemon is his Zubat, who we're thankfully able to hit with Tackle for a one-shot. Maxie's last Pokemon is his Camerupt, who yet again we're thankfully able to hit with Takedown for a one-shot. Take that, Maxie, not even the power of Pocket Sand can defeat us. We very quickly grab the Meteorite so that we can give it to Professor Cosmo. The reason we do this? Well, it's for an old friend, Return. That's right, Return is back yet again to carry us to glory. All hail glorious TM27, savior of Pokemon solo runs. While we're over here in Fall Arbor Town, we also get another old friend of ours, Double Team. Don't worry, I don't plan on using it unless absolutely necessary. I just find it interesting that we got both of these 2 moves from the same location in the game. Getting back to battles, our next challenge is against Flannery, who really only has one Pokemon in particular that I'm worried about, that being Torkoal. Anyways, Flannery leads with her Numel, who I decided was the safest to set up on. We use Howl, but Numel goes for Magnitude, getting a 6 for not so much damage. We then use another Howl while Numel uses Sunny Day, but that doesn't deter us, so we use another Howl. Numel then tries to smite us with Overheat, but thankfully it misses and we're able to land our Return to knock it out. Flannery then sends out her Slugma next, who we beat into, I guess, even more mush with Return? Flannery's next Pokemon is her Camerupt, who cannot even hope to withstand the power of friendship. Flannery's last Pokemon is her Torkoal, and this is why we use so many Howls at the start. Due to our attack buffs, we're able to easily dispatch of the Torkoal. Before we can challenge Norman, there's a certain someone that you may have forgotten about. Yeah, that's right, we need to beat Brawly still. Brawly leads with his Machop, who we instantly beat into the floor with Return. Brawly then sends out his Meditite, who is also crushed by Return. Brawly's last Pokemon is his Makuhita, something that would have been an absolute pain in the past, but now not even worth commenting on. Now that we've beaten Brawly, we can finally challenge Norman. I may have perhaps been a bit overambitious in my first attempt with Norman, though. Yeah. Anyways, Norman leads with his Spinda, who we beat down with the power of Return before it can Teeter Dance us. Up next is Slacking, who we do nothing against. We just Howl 6 times in a row while Slacking repeatedly tries to use Counter between loafing around turns. We then one-shot Slacking with Return. Who knew that the simplest solution to Slacking was doing absolutely nothing and just stacking? Norman's next Pokemon is his Vigoroth, who we turn to dust with the sheer overwhelming force of Friendship. Norman's last Pokemon is his Linoon, who meets the same sad fate as Vigoroth before it. With Norman defeated, our next battle is against Team Aqua admin Shelly, who has taken over the Weather Institute. Shelly leads with her Carvana, who we instantly one-shot with Return, though the rough skin does hurt us a tad. Shelly's last Pokemon is her Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. We go for a Return, and sadly we fall short of a one-shot, meaning that Mightyena is able to hit us with Swagger to confuse us. Fortunately, we land our Return despite the confusion and close out the battle. As we leave the Weather Institute, we're stopped by Brendan for our fourth rival battle. Brendan leads with his Slugma, who we're able to one-shot with Return. Next up is Grovyle, who we're also able to one-shot with Return. Brendan's last Pokemon is his Pelipper, who we're not able to one-shot. Pelipper sadly steals a few precious seconds from our lives by getting a double Protect, and then we're finally able to finish it off with a single Return. Now that those distractions are out of the way, we're facing off against Winona this time, our 6th gym leader. Winona leads with her Swablu, who really doesn't pose a threat against us as long as it doesn't use Perish Song, which had happened a few times. In this case, we used Howl 6 times while Swablu hit us with Aerial Ace once and then failed to use Mirror Move 5 times. Poor thing is just dumb, I guess. We then put it out of its misery with Return. Winona then sends out her Tropius, who is also obliterated by Return. Next up is Pelipper, and I guess these things just love using Protect since this one uses it too. Fortunately, no double Protect this time, and we're able to take it down with one more Return. Winona then sends out her Skarmory, who is the Pokemon we were stacking Howls for. Thanks to said Howls, we were able to swiftly deal with the Skarmory before things get too annoying. Winona's last Pokemon is her Altaria, and I'm guessing you know how this goes. A single Return takes down the Altaria. We press on to Lily Cove and run into Brendan for our last rival battle against him. He's never really put up much of a fight, so I wonder if it'll be different this time. Spoiler alert, no. Brendan leads with his Tropius, who we set up on by using Howl. Tropius then uses Magical Leaf for minimal damage, but then, as we use our next 2 Howls, for some reason Tropius uses Sweet Scent twice. I don't get why it did that, but thanks for the air freshener, I guess. A single Return is all that is needed to knock out the sweet-smelling flying tropical Brontosaurus. Brendan's next Pokemon is his Grovyle, who we completely crush with Return. Following Grovyle is Slugma, who we're also able to one-shot with Return. Brendan's last Pokemon is his Pelipper, who, you guessed it, uses Protect against our first Return. Absolute shame that Pelipper couldn't protect itself from not existing after our last Return, though. Truly a shame. With our business concluded in Lily Cove for now, we head over to Mount Pyre and collect the Magma Emblem. From there, we're able to track down Team Magma and raid their base. We find Tabitha hanging out near the bottom of the base and challenge him to a battle. Tabitha leads with his Numel, who we decided to set up on with Howl while Numel uses Focus Energy. On the following turn, we go for a Shadow Ball and one-shot the Numel. Wait. I thought our Poochyena was a physical attacker. Well, you see, little Timmy, back in Generation 3, the physical special split hadn't been created yet. What this means is that all moves with a certain typing fall into either physical or special instead of a per-move basis. What this means is that in Generation 3, Shadow Ball is a physical, non-contact move. Shadow Ball will benefit from all the attack EV training that we did earlier. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get back into the battle. Up next is Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. Unfortunately for Mightyena, its intimidation means nothing to us, and we one-shot it with Return anyways. Tabitha then sends out his Zubat, who we blast with Shadow Ball. Tabitha's last Pokemon is his Camerupt, who we also blast with Shadow Ball but fail to knock out, meaning that we're hit with Rock Slide for a tiny chunk of health. On the next turn, we land another Shadow Ball and knock out the Camerupt. With Tabitha shoved into a locker, we tried to stop Maxie from awakening Groudon, but we're too late. Groudon wakes up and flies? Yeah, I guess it can fly. Groudon flies out of Mount Chimney to go somewhere until later. Anyways, Maxie gets all upset and challenges us to a battle. Maxie leads with his Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. We go for a Return anyways and only do half health, but then Mightyena swaggers us, raising our attack and confusing us. Maxie then heals Mightyena, but we crush it with a Return right after to knock it out. Maxie's next Pokemon is his Crobat, who we surprisingly outspeed and beat down with a Return after snapping out of confusion. Maxie's last Pokemon is his Camerupt, who falls just like the rest. We then make a quick stop over in Slateport to witness Archie majestically stealing a submarine before heading back to Lily Cove to battle Team Aqua admin Matt, who interestingly enough does not have any water-type Pokemon. Really not feeling the whole Aqua vibe with this guy. Anyways, Matt leads with his Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. We're unfazed and land a Return, sadly not one-shotting and getting hit with Scary Face as a result. Matt then heals up his Mightyena, but it doesn't matter since we got a crit Return to knock it out. Matt's last Pokemon is his Golbat, who outspeeds us with a crit Wing attack before we're able to hit it back with Return for a huge chunk of health, though failing to knock it out. We're then hit by another Wing attack, dropping us all the way down to 23 HP before we land our second Return, taking out the Golbat. Our next stop is in Moss Deep for a battle against Tate and Liza. Tate and Liza usually give me a pretty hard time, so let's see how this goes. Tate and Liza lead with Claydol and Xatu, while we have our Poochyena, Poochyena, and Magikarp since we're forced to have 2 Pokemon to start the battle. We immediately knock out the Claydol with a crit Shadow Ball, while Xatu uses Psychic to knock out Magikarp. Solrock is sent out next, who we blast with another crit Shadow Ball to knock it out, while Xatu uses Calm Mind. Lunatone is sent out next, who we also one-shot with Shadow Ball, though this time without a crit, while Xatu uses Sunny Day because it already used Calm Mind and that didn't help it cope either. On the next turn, we put Xatu out of its misery with another Shadow Ball, closing out the battle. Team Magma then takes over the Moss Deep Space Center, so we quickly head over there to help Steven deal with that. This is yet another battle that is usually very difficult, but since Tate and Liza went so well, I'm hoping this goes well too. Tabitha and Maxie lead with Camerupt and Mightyena, the Mightyena lowering our attack with Intimidate. We decide to take out Maxie's Mightyena as soon as possible, landing a return on it for half health before Mightyena hits us with Scary Face and Camerupt hits us with Takedown. Mightyena then uses Swagger on Matang, but we're able to knock out the Mightyena with a crit return right after. Maxie then sends out his Camerupt, while Tabitha's Camerupt uses Amnesia. Now, I don't know what it is about these Camerupts, but the only thing either of them would do is use Amnesia. I have no idea what was going on here. Anyways, we take down Maxie's Camerupt with 2 returns, meaning that Maxie is down to his last Pokemon, Crobat. Crobat outspeeds us with Mean Look, and then Matang hits it with Metal Claw for half health before we're able to finish it off with a return, meaning that Maxie is now out of the battle. Camerupt then uses Focus Energy, but it doesn't mean much since Matang hits it with Metal Claw and then we finish it off with Return. Tabitha then sends out his Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate again, but thankfully Matang is here to carry us, and so another Metal Claw and Return takes care of Mightyena. Tabitha's last Pokemon is his Golbat, who hits us with Wing Attack before we use Metal Claw and Return to take it down. Team Magma agrees to stop causing problems, so now we've got to track down Team Aqua. We find Team Aqua in the seafloor cavern, but before we can get to Archie, Shelly blocks our path. Shelly leads with her Sharpedo, who we hit with Shadow Ball for a good chunk of health, lowering its special defense in the process. Sharpedo then uses Scary Face and outspeeds us with Slash on the next turn, but it doesn't do too much damage and we knock it out with another Shadow Ball. Shelly then sends out her last Pokemon, Mightyena, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. We hit it with a return for a huge amount of damage, but then we're hit with Scary Face to slow us down. On the next turn, Mightyena tries to use Takedown but misses, meaning that we can finish it off with another return. As we approach where we think Archie should be, it turns out he was behind us all along. He must have been hiding in a corner or something. Classic Archie. Anyways, Archie leads with his Mightyena, who does the thing with the thing. We then use Howl while Mightyena uses Scary Face, lowering our speed. We then use Howl again, and Mightyena uses Scary Face again. We're now ready to fight, but Mightyena uses Swagger first, confusing us. Thankfully, we get through the confusion and land a return for a one-shot. Crobat is up next, who outspeeds us with Wing Attack, and thankfully we still don't hit ourselves, meaning that Crobat is turned to dust. Archie's last Pokemon is his Sharpedo, who outspeeds us with Slash for a good chunk of damage, but it doesn't matter much since we blast it with Shadow Ball to take it down. Normally, when you beat someone in a Pokemon battle, both parties agree to listen to the winner. Not so much with Archie. Archie decides to wake up Kyogre anyways, which results in a huge territorial dispute with Groudon, who has been suspiciously missing since Maxie woke it up not too long ago. A big kaiju fight ensues in Sootopolis, so we're sent to the Sky Pillar to get Rayquaza. But just when we reach the top, Rayquaza wakes up by itself and then solves the problem for us. I guess we didn't really need to do anything after all. Now that Sootopolis isn't under threat of destruction, we can challenge our last gym leader, Hoenn. Hoenn leads with his Love Disc, who we immediately knock out with Return before it can confuse us with Sweet Kiss or Water Pulse. Hoenn then sends out his Whiskash, and it is here that we decide to set up. We use Howl while Whiskash uses Amnesia. Okay. We then use Howl again, and Whiskash uses Amnesia. Again. Alright. We then decide to use Howl a third time while Whiskash uses Amnesia. I figured we'd just keep doing Howl and Amnesia, but then Whiskash uses Rain Dance, so I knew our time had come to an end and we take it down with a return. Up next is Celio, who we also one-shot with Return. Hoenn then sends out his Crawdaunt, who we beat into pieces with Return. Hoenn's last Pokemon is his Kingdra, who tries in vain to use evasion strats against us, but you can't hide from my Poochyena, and so we knock it out with a single return. With all of the gym leaders now beaten, we move on through Victory Road. As we're hiking through, some random green-haired child I've never met before stops us. He says that we're rivals, but I don't believe him. He challenges us to a battle though, and I figured that if he wants to feed his Pokemon to Poochyena, he's more than welcome. Wally leads with his Altaria, who we use Howl against while Altaria uses Safeguard. On the following turn, we unleash Destruction upon the poor Burb and knock it out. Wally then sends out his Delcatty, who we also obliterate with Return. The following Delcatty is Magneton, who tanks our Return only to screech at us. Sure, whatever. We then knock out Magneton with another Return. Up next is Roselia, who is also felled by Return. Wally's last Pokemon is his Gardevoir, and this time we shake things up and knock it out with a Shadow Ball for the extra salt in the wound. I realized that we were quite a low level to take on the Elite Four, and usually I like hitting level 100 before the champion anyways, so I figured we'd do some grinding here at the end of Victory Road. Well, we met a new friend while we were grinding, and I was quite surprised. Meet Echo, the newest shiny on the channel. Very happy to have Echo as part of the history of the channel, with Echo being our third non-guaranteed shiny. You thought I was done talking about stuff that didn't involve fights, right? You probably did. I did too. But then I noticed something when I was checking out Poochyna's stats before heading into the Elite Four. I noticed that at some point during our grinding, we had actually acquired Pokérus. Echo had it too. Now, if you don't know what Pokérus is, I don't blame you, and I'll explain why. When people talk about things being unlikely to happen in Pokemon, shiny Pokemon are usually the number one thing that comes to mind. Shiny Pokemon in Generation 3 games have a 1 in 8,192 chance of appearing. That's really unlikely, right? Well, Pokérus is even more rare than that. The odds of Pokérus being acquired by one of your Pokemon is actually 3 in 65,536, or 1 in 21,845. This is extremely rare. The function of Pokérus is basically just to help your Pokemon during the EV training period, doubling the amount of EVs you can get from wild Pokemon. Basically, it's useless to us right now, but still, just encountering Pokérus and a shiny in the same video is absolutely insane. Now that I'm done nerding out about random stuff that has no weight on the challenge itself, we can get into our battle against Sydney, the first of the Elite Four. Sydney leads with his Mightyena, who lowers my motivation to type this script. That doesn't matter so much though, since we're able to one-shot it with Return. Sydney's next Pokemon is his Shiftry, who again is one-shot after being battered by Return. Cacturne is up next, who yet again is annihilated due to our Return. Sydney then sends out his formidable Crawdaunt the Mighty, who face tanks our Return and slaps us back with Surf for a quarter of our health. Sydney then heals up his Crawdaunt, who we immediately beat with Return again. This happens yet again on the following turn, both times Crawdaunt tanking our Return. Sydney runs out of full restores, and finally we're able to slay the mighty Crawdaunt with one last Return. Sydney's last Pokemon is his Absol, who is the last to fall to our Return Rampage. Phoebe is our next opponent, and I gotta say, I am so glad Shadow Ball works on Poochyena. I mean, really, I am so glad that it does. Phoebe leads with her first Dusclops, who protects against our Shadow Ball to stop for time. On the next turn, we blast it with Shadow Ball after Dusclops fails to protect. Next up is Phoebe's first Banette, who is also blown apart by a crit Shadow Ball. Phoebe's next Pokemon is her Sableye, who is also obliterated by Shadow Ball. The second Banette is sent out to stop us, but it cannot and falls to Shadow Ball. Phoebe's last Pokemon is her Dusclops, who is the last to fall to our Shadow Ball. The third of the Elite Four is Glacia, who has some chonky Pokemon. Glacia starts off with her first Celio, who we use Howl against while Celio sets up Hail. We then Howl a second time while Celio uses Body Slam, thankfully not getting a Paralyze on us. We then begin our Return spam, knocking out the Celio instantly. Glacia then sends out her first Glalie, who we break into pieces with Return. Next up is the second Celio, who we club with Return to knock it out. Glacia's next Pokemon is her second Glalie, who is shattered like the first. Glacia's last Pokemon is her Walrein, the thickest of lads, who is just not thick enough to tank our Return. The last Elite Four member is Drake, who I was somewhat worried about. Drake leads with his Shelgon, who was apparently terrified of my Poochyena because all it did was protect for 3 turns in a row before we finally got a Return in after 2 Howls. Up next is Altaria, who we also beat with Return to knock it out. Drake's next Pokemon is his Kingdra, who we outspeed with Return, taking it down. Drake then sends out his Flygon, who I was worried would outspeed us, but it seems my worries were unwarranted and we're able to one-shot it with ease. Drake's last Pokemon is his Salamence, who lowers our attack with Intimidate. No big deal though, we just annihilate the accursed dragon with a crit return to close out the battle. Now that we're here at Wallace, I was thinking he would be rather difficult due to how tanky his Pokemon are, coupled with how low Poochyena's special defense is. I had been preparing for this fight though, something I haven't used until now will finally come in handy. Wallace leads with his Wailord, who normally we use Howl against, but this time I decided to hit this chonky boy out of anger, which resulted in a crit. Tentacruel is sent out next, and here I knew we couldn't knock it out with only a single return, and that if I goofed around for too long we'd get poisoned. Instead, I used Double Team 3 times, and then I used Howl 3 times, dodging several Hydro Pumps and Toxic attempts. Finally, we're ready to fight again and one-shot the Tentacruel. Wallace then sends out his Ludicolo, who we also beat down with return. Up next is Whiscash, but I don't care how cute and stupid it looks, we're knocking it out with return. Wallace then sends out his Gyarados to lower our attack with Intimidate, but it doesn't matter, we're just too strong and one-shot it with return. Wallace's last Pokemon is his Milotic, who fares no better than the rest of Wallace's team, falling to a single return. I really wasn't sure how this run was going to go when I saw that the Discord had voted for it. I figured that Mudkip was likely going to be the last good run through Hoenn for a while, but boy was I wrong. I took one look at Poochyena's move pool and knew I could make it work. Poochyena having access to Howl, Return, Shadow Ball, and Double Team is frankly just broken. Poochyena is very strong. This, coupled with it being a Dark type, meant that one of the hardest fights in the game, that being against Tate and Liza, was a complete joke since they couldn't even hit us with Psychic-type attacks. I had an absolute blast in this run, even without the inclusion of Echo and the welcome surprise of Pokerus. The final time for this run was 22 hours and 24 minutes, meaning that not only is Poochyena the best run through Hoenn to date on my channel, but it is so by a large margin. Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip all took upwards of 40 hours to complete the run, while Poochyena over here is doing the run in half of that. I gotta say, I am super impressed. Before we end things off here, I wanted to let you all know that I stream this run over on Twitch, which I plan on doing weekly. Also, if you liked this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe as it would help me out a lot. I've got new Pokemon challenges coming out weekly, so if you liked this video, there are plenty more to come. If you'd like, feel free to leave a comment to let me know how you feel about the video, since I love seeing what you guys think about my content. If you're interested in hanging out, feel free to follow the link below to either my Twitch, my Discord, or my Twitter, if Twitter is still around when you're watching this video. This has been Shro, and thank you for watching.